This Friday night, join Jim, Jeff, and Stack with special guest Eva Rupert from the Discovery Channel's hit series Naked and Afraid. Hear what really took place as she braved the desert, naked and afraid. On Friday Night Live this Friday at 9 p.m. Central. Only on Fox Sports Radio 1410 and foxsports1410.com.
Earlier this evening, we mentioned that we had a special guest, Eva Rupert. She co-starred in a recent episode of Naked and Afraid. Particular television series is broadcast on the Discovery Channel. She joins us now. Welcome, Eva. How are you tonight?
Hey, thank you.
A little bit about the premise of the show.
So, Naked and Afraid is a Discovery Channel reality TV show that takes two people and drops them in the middle of the wilderness with next to nothing. No clothes, no shelter, no food, just one survival item and one partner with one survival item. And you spend 21 days surviving a really remote location.
Tell us where you were.
I was in Madagascar, like south-central Madagascar in the middle of the desert.
Eva, this is Jeff here, and I'm just curious, prior to your appearance on this show and taping that in Madagascar, what kind of previous survivalist-type experience did you have that prepped you for what you were going to experience and endure in East Africa?
Let's see. Well, I've been working as a survivalist, training as a survivalist, and living a sort of a survival lifestyle for decades at this point. You know, it all started just being a kid in the woods, running around in the Northeast. But then it kind of evolved into this traveling and learning and seeking out teachers and finding yourself in bizarre situations out in really wild and remote places and learning the skills that people have been practicing to keep themselves alive for hundreds, thousands, what have you, numbers of years. So it's just been sort of a lifelong process of amassing skills and just creating a really well-rounded survivalist mentality.
And Eva, so obviously you had the skills necessary to survive this kind of an endeavor, but 3 weeks obviously fending for yourself. The initial moment when you just get dropped off and, you know, at the beginning of the show, if you haven't seen it, you pretty much jump out of the back of a pickup truck, strip down, and then you meet your companion for out there. So, I mean, that's got to be fairly uncomfortable. Tell us a little bit about that.
You know, it's wild. You strip down, and all of a sudden you realize you're standing there naked in front of camera people, and you're meeting a complete stranger that you've never met before, and you are meeting somebody naked for the first time. But the truth of the matter is, you have about 5 minutes to worry about being naked, and then all of a sudden reality sets in, and you realize you have to survive 21 days, and you need to get to work immediately. So, you know, the uncomfortable aspect of, you know, being naked kind of, you know, it wanes very quickly.
Eva, this is Jeff again, and I'm just curious how this particular opportunity on this Discovery Channel show presented itself to you, and how did you find yourself in the position to seize the opportunity to make that appearance?
You know, it was wild. I was walking home from work one day, I got a phone call, and they were like, hey, we've kind of seen that you're a survival instructor and that you've had all kinds of crazy adventures just from crawling around on the internet, which is kind of what they do. And, you know, they approached me with the idea of being on the show, and it's just an opportunity that you can't turn down. So I had, in very short time, 6 days notice, to put my life in order, find somebody to house sit the dogs, and to just get on after it. So, you know, a week's notice to spend, you know, 21 days surviving on the other side of the world.
Yeah, and that's the time frame. That's completely crazy. So 6 days. So the week before you had no idea you're going. You find yourself dropped in the middle of Africa. Talk about the first few days, because obviously, you know, you said you have to get down to business right away. What were your priorities? What was, okay, we got to do this right away?
You know, as a survivalist, you have a checklist in your head, and you're constantly assessing things. And it always goes shelter, water, fire, and food. Those are your 4 basic priorities. Food is way down on the list, but first and foremost, especially in a really dry, really hot, really blazing sun desert environment, taking care of the shelter first and foremost is the most important thing. You absolutely have to have that shelter. And so we found a cave. It was something that I spotted on the way into the insertion point. And it was just this big sandstone cave, and it provided us the shade that we needed, the coolness during the blazing heat of midday. I mean, it was in the hundreds during the day. And so just to be able to be out of that cooking, roasting sun as much as possible was essential to our survival. The cave also provided us with water. There was a spring that came out in it. And in the beginning, we were boiling water, but we were able to chip away a little bit of the cave wall, the sandstone cave, and create a little pool to collect our water in. And it was filtered through hundreds of feet of sandstone, and so it was this perfect, clear spring water that was coming out. But it took a lot of work to get to it. It took hours every day to drink. And so once we had those two things secured, and once we had our fire secured, then, which, fire took a while because we were in a fire-retardant desert climate. There was, it was dry, but none of the wood would burn. Tinder was bizarrely scarce. And, we did as much as we possibly could in those first couple days to set us up for success over the course of the 3 weeks.
You talk about getting your priorities in whack, 1, 2, 3, 4. And, okay, so food's way down on the list, but obviously you can't go 3 weeks without eating. And I know on the show, the first attempt, you caught a snake, and that didn't go so well. And the eventual best meal you said was a snake egg. So my question is, not what do they taste like, but at that point, is any food, you could look at, the most disgusting thing in the world tasting like filet mignon if you're hungry enough, I would imagine.
The truth of the matter is at that point, you're less concerned about the taste of it and more concerned about putting calories into your body. Because you feel your energy level depleting. You see yourself going slower and slower and slower. And, it was a constant struggle to barely scrape by on the calories. We were in an area where it was the very end of a very long dry season. So the place we were at had not seen rain in months, like literally, I want to say 3 months since it has rained where we were. And so dealing with that was another thing. So there was no animals there. There was no large game. There was no hunting. I was setting trap lines and the traps were absolutely futile. You don't see it in the show because you have to condense it down to an hour, but it's like there was so much, it was so incredibly dry that, we just had so little. We had so few resources. And so everything you put in your mouth, every little calorie is like a total celebration.
Yeah, no question there. And even my question with, obviously people are there filming it. I know there's a certain amount of maybe like stationary cameras and things like that, but are the cameramen there like, sitting back, housing hot dogs and, just drinking bottled water in front of you like, oh, that looks rough, or what's the dynamic there?
It's funny. The crew is instructed to not interfere with the survivalist process. So Jeff and I, my partner's great guy, Jeff, he and I were very much going about our business, and the cameramen are very much there as observers, just watching it happen. And, they had a base camp set up a couple miles away, and they would take rotations into the nearest town, which was several hours of commuting either way. And so they would rotate out and take care of themselves in like a normal first world fashion. But the two of us were out there, and at one point I asked one of my producers, I was like, Dave, is this really bizarre for you to watch this? And he said, yes. He's like, it's very weird because they can't intervene. It's like this wild, intense survival. It's like an experiment going on just to see how these two people react.
I'm just thinking you maybe didn't have an inkling about how the experience was going to unfold, being new to that particular environment. At any point in that 3 weeks, prior to leaving Madagascar, did you express or entertain any regrets or second thoughts about visiting that country and undergoing this taxing experience?
I have no regrets whatsoever. When you're a person with my set of skills, or any of us, anybody on the show has this skill set, and you welcome the opportunity to have an experience like that, to have a completely wild survival experience in an environment that you have never experienced before. Just because you have to test your skills in a completely new environment, and it comes down to this really core sense of self-reliance.
Was there any time in which you were concerned about your compatibility with your co-star, or was the focus so entirely on survival that it really became a secondary issue?
Lots of people who've been on Naked and Afraid, and not that there's been that many people, but lots of people who've been on Naked and Afraid have dealt with interpersonal issues with their partners. They've dealt with like this sort of infighting and this bickering, and have to deal with partners who are less than productive or less than skilled or less than enthusiastic about the experience. But Jeff and I absolutely, we had sort of this unspoken pact that we were going to watch out for each other, that we have each other's backs, that we were going to do everything in our power to, be kind to one another, despite our differences, despite the fact that we're in a really compromised situation. So, we put our own personal differences aside in favor of the fact that we were better off surviving if there was two of us and we were in it together 100%.
And Eva, Stack here again. We're thinking about pitching a new show to the Discovery Channel here, more localized to the North Dakota area, Surviving the Badlands. Would you be interested in maybe coming out and doing a couple of days there, seeing how you do?
I would absolutely do a couple of days in the Badlands. That was an amazing, that was just a wild, intense, incredible remote area that I have not spent nearly enough time in.
KDKT.
Fox Sports 1410. A DSN radio station.